Rise of Kingdoms is a game that I'm sure we all know has a lot of problems, and a lot of people always say that the game is dying. So today I'm going to be answering that question by asking, is Rise of Kingdoms really a dead game, or is it a dying game? And I'll be using my 3 years of experience, my time as a content creator, the trends I've seen in my comments, on my videos, the views, all that stuff, to really answer the question, is Rise of Kingdoms dying? So if you're interested in the issues of Rise of Kingdoms and if it is a dead game or not, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's start off by answering the first question. In my opinion, do I think that Rise of Kingdoms is dying? And I want to say that the answer is, it is probably dying. I think the game isn't going to die, like fully die out, but it is definitely on a downward trajectory. I haven't really seen much fresh player base come into the game for a while, and especially whenever I look at new kingdoms, it is very underwhelming what you see. Most kingdoms are just jumper groups just taking over the kingdom, forcing out new players, and there isn't really that large amount of a new player base that we used to see. We still do see about a kingdom a day being made. I mean, I made this account in 3567 about a day or so ago, and then there is already another kingdom. So if we go by that, then the game technically is not dying, because there is a kingdom that literally just opened up an hour ago. But in my opinion, I think the game is not as popular and as big as it used to be. And we can even see it here on the Google Trends page. Rise of Kingdoms is on a downward trajectory. I think there is really no doubt about it. June 2023, which was around last year, no, February 2023 last year, and it was a bit of a spike. We saw a peak. This probably around the biggest was around when the Vikings were released. I'm pretty sure this is around when it was released, around the start of 2022. I'm not sure what they released in February. It might have been the Greek civilization. And then this is Rise of Kingdoms now. We're below half the initial popularity. Once again, this is Google Trends. This isn't 100% accurate, but it does give kind of a vibe of what you would see. I mean, when I first started doing YouTube, I started in April of 2023. As you can see, Rise of Kingdoms, much bigger search term at that point. Nowadays, it isn't as big. It's really just as simple as that. And I think that isn't very good for the game, of course. Losing interest over time, less people really caring about the game, does definitely say a lot about the future of the game. Less people interested, there isn't as much of a new player base. We can see there seems to be a bit of an upturn here just at the start of June. Maybe this has to do with the new graphics that could definitely help the game. But I think there are a lot of issues which do plague the game and reasons behind why the game is, in my opinion, actually dying. So let's get into those reasons. Now let's start off with the first reason as to why I think the game is kind of dying, and it's definitely got to do with Imperium Kingdoms. Imperium Kingdoms used to be pretty much central to Rise of Kingdoms, and if you were at all on the competitive scene, all you would do is look at Imperium Kingdoms, Imperium KVKs, going to Imperium KVKs, and all these things would give a lot of hype to the game. I mean, Imperium Kingdoms were the thing. It's just where the top meta and the competition really was. And you can see it, for example, in 1960. This is a kingdom that is one of the biggest in the game, definitely one of the strongest, and there is definitely a lot of issues right now which are plaguing Imperiums, and it's kind of coming from that domain system. I think the domain system overall was a horrible idea. I don't really see the purpose of it, and it just fully defeated the whole idea of a proper competitive scene. I mean, it literally restricts the number of players you can have in a KVK, and I'm pretty sure I read somewhere on the official Rise of Kingdoms Discord, they're going to be reducing again the size of each domain. And you can see here in my own KVK, these kingdoms, these Imperium Kingdoms, have got domains. These are all Imperium Kingdoms, and all the Imperium ones have a domain, and they're going to be shrinking the size. And there are a few issues about the whole entire domain system. First of all, it really just restricts players from bringing their farm accounts in, which is always annoying. I mean, I don't see why they should be restricting people from using farms. Yes, farm filling is a thing, but I mean, it just allows people to fight even more, which literally just means more people will play the game and more people are going to enjoy it. In my opinion, I think farm filling is not that bad. Yes, it might create laggier KVKs, but who doesn't want to play in a KVK where there are thousands of marchers on the open field? That's really the whole entire point of it. I don't want to play in some KVK where there's maybe 100 marchers total at the peak time. I want to be in a KVK that's massive, and people want to watch KVKs that are massive. They are interested. I'm sure most people watching right now don't really care about a C-seed or D-seed KVK unless you're really in that KVK. You only care about those KVKs where it's the biggest kingdoms clashing out to see who's going to win. That is really one of the bloods of Rise of Kingdoms, is seeing the big kingdoms clash out, even if you don't want to play in them, and just seeing who's going to win, which kingdom is the stronger kingdom. For example, the 1093 versus 1960 KVK was probably one of the biggest things that really ever happened in Rise of Kingdoms. And I mean, you can see it here on Chisco's channel. 1093 versus 1960, the stream got 52,000 views. I mean, as a Rise of Kingdoms YouTuber, someone who follows the streaming scene a lot, most live streams don't get 52,000 views. That is a very rare thing to see live streams get that many views, especially in the Rise of Kingdoms scene, at least Rise of Kingdoms wise. That is a lot of views. I mean, we can look at Chisco's average views here. They're nowhere near 52,000. Most things he streams don't get 52,000, but a lot of people cared about that 1093 versus 1960 Kingsland, and that's why it got 52,000 views. The past 7 got 42,000 views. Clearly, people like watching those big KVKs, people like fighting in those big KVKs, and they're a very, very big part of the Rise of Kingdoms scene. So I don't see the reason why Lilith should really be restricting these big Imperium Kingdoms from doing big Imperium Kingdom things. Yes, technically, it could result in everybody migrating to a kingdom like 1093, which was kind of happening, but I don't think it was a big enough issue where it should be addressed in that manner. And yes, KVK matchmaking for Imperiums absolutely sucks, but I think that can be addressed differently than just restricting the size of Imperiums and making it so that they pretty much don't exist. It doesn't make sense to restrict a kingdom from fighting because they are too strong or have too many players. It really does just defeat the purpose of being in that type of kingdom. And if we think about it, those kingdoms will balance themselves out. If no one in those kingdoms likes fighting or they hate those really, really long KVK wait times, they're just going to leave. People will migrate out, and then those kingdoms will balance themselves out without putting a domain system in. If you just fix the matchmaking, it would have probably done a lot more than adding some form of a domain system. And I know a lot of people absolutely hate the domain system, and when I looked at the official Discord, I saw the 53 skull emojis and I thought, well, that's probably a good enough thing to say. Most people do not like the domain system. I mean, all these flags, no idea what that's about, but the skulls and also the eggplant emojis and the noob alert, I'm pretty sure people are not happy at all with this whole domain system idea. And I reckon this feedback survey, it doesn't have many kind words in it saying we absolutely love the idea to restrict every single kingdom, and a lot of kingdoms already have over 500 active governors, so this domain system is once again only going to impact KVK even more. And when I say that, what I mean is the domain system really just results in making a bunch of dead kingdoms. If we're being realistic, no one's ever split up their kingdom fighting force into 2 different domains. I'm pretty sure every single Imperium here, their different domains, are all going to have one with fighting and one that's just filled with random accounts. We can probably check it right now. The 1862 domain, the second one is probably just a deadbeat domain. I'm not sure where it is. Here it is. So this domain right here, they're in like a D-seed KVK. They're not doing anything in this KVK. I bet no one's fighting in it. I bet they've barely built anything, and they really don't care about it, especially when you're at the point of 1365, where you've got 3 domains. People just do not care about those types of KVKs, and the domain system is at that point just overinflating the number of kingdoms in KVKs who are just not interested in fighting. You might as well just not even have them there and just not let the players go into Lost Kingdom because they're not even going to fight in it anyways. And I think it'd be a very rare situation where you see that second domain actually fighting. And from what I can tell from the map, I don't actually see 1862's fort anywhere. So I don't even think they're even interested in this KVK, which makes sense. I mean, why would you fight in a KVK that you just don't care about? Once again, it's just adding those unnecessary kingdoms and pretty much just adding a bunch of farm accounts that aren't going to do any fighting. I'm sure most players in 1862 would rather save their farms for feeding their main accounts or just not even killing him in a random D-seed KVK. They're just not interested, and this domain is a complete waste of time to them, which in my opinion is completely fair from the player's perspective and isn't very community smart from the perspective of Lilith. They should have known that this wouldn't have been a very good idea, and I think that after the beta for it, they most likely should have reverted this update. I'm sure most people don't like the domains. Maybe I'm wrong, but in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of them. I think it's not a very good system, and it is really a big issue behind Rise of Kingdoms right now, heavily impacting the fact that people aren't enjoying KVKs as much because they can't see those massive Imperiums clash it out. And if the domain number people, the number of people in domain gets halved, there's pretty much no reason to even be in an Imperium at that point, and even ACIDs will get affected. I know our kingdom has like 502 active players or something, which means that technically we would be given a domain. No idea how it would work with 502 active accounts, like do we put 2 in a random domain? I'm not too sure, but technically we would be under the system where we get given a domain, and really what it's just going to cause is a bunch of kingdoms kicking out players to get just under the domain number, and it's probably going to create a whale fest where they only want high power players, because even if you get an Imperium at that point, as long as you're not in the domain, you're still going to be in a good situation. So it's definitely not going to result in a proper change to help fix Imperiums. I think it's only going to create a lot more issues. The next big issue with Rise of Kingdoms, in my opinion, that's definitely leading to the death of the game, and these next couple are going to be things I've mentioned before, but this first one is just the repetitive release of commanders. I mean, Rise of Kingdoms is kind of a game that's about repetition. KVK off-season, KVK off-season, KVK off-season, that is pretty much how it goes. But I mean, a lot of people, I feel like, and maybe this is just me personally, are getting a little bit sick of, oh, okay, new commander release, cavalry, infantry, archers, range, cavalry, infantry, archers, ranged. Oh, the new commanders are good. Oh, they're slightly better. Oh, they're not so good. And that's really all we kind of see with commanders. That is kind of how the cycle goes. And I think once again, it's a bit of a vicious cycle where it's like, okay, I've invested in this commander. They're going to last me 3 years, and then I'll pick up the next one and I'll just keep doing that. And there isn't really anything unique about releasing commanders. I know that is a bit difficult to add something unique, but I think that those different thought processes and adding things that are completely unique is where you drive a video game to be something a little bit more interesting than just, here's a commander, they're new, and they're going to be good with the old commander, and they're going to kick out the older commander. That is really just a very boring meta shift, and I've noticed over time, people's hype for commander releases just isn't there. Most people are like, oh, okay, there's a new commander coming. Who really cares at this point? They're probably going to be good. I can probably invest in them if I want to. I don't really have to, and I can just pick up the next one because there's going to be a next one regardless. So there is definitely that monotony with commander releases now. And when you've played the game for a long time, like a lot of players have, I'm sure most people watching this video, their accounts are at least 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even 2,000 days in. Their accounts are very, very old, and most people have seen a lot of these commander releases over many years, and it's just been the same thing on repeat. I mean, imagine watching the release of Ramses, and then every single couple of months there is still more commanders coming into the game, and it's just the same thing on basically repeat. It's pretty much like Groundhog Day. So once again, that can definitely get quite boring, and I find that can make the game a lot less interesting. Just expecting these new commanders to come willy-nilly, and it just kind of removes the excitement factor around them, I'd say, and it definitely makes them quite basic and fairly uninteresting. The next thing that I have mentioned before, and this is definitely something a lot of people speak about, is the fact that when it comes to events in the off-season pretty much, it is completely dry, basic, and boring. Every single event that's ever come in the event calendar at this point, really it's showed up before, or they just keep reusing old events. For example, Alliance Mobilization, it was unique when it first came out. It absolutely sucks in my opinion, but it was unique when it first came out, and it was at least something a little bit different. But now we've seen about 100 Alliance mobilizations. Most people just don't care for it. Silk Road I've seen since I started the game 3 years ago. The France event has probably come around 100 times, and this is really just a reskin for every single civilization. Champions of Olympia, old event. These random PvE events like Spreading Civilizations or Strategic Reserve, they've come around 1 billion times. Daily Gathering, it's honestly a waste of time. No one even cares about it. As you can see, I haven't gathered any resources today, but no one really cares about these events. And Soroli Crisis, I mean, I've grown grey hairs in the time that this event has come around. So a lot of these events really do get extremely repetitive, and it's kind of like, I've seen this event 1,000 times. I'm not excited for it. I mean, I've seen it from when I first started the game. It's still here now. Why do I really care about this event? I'm just going to do it only because I want the rewards. It is pretty much how these events go, and I think events get very neglected. The only change we ever really see, they'll add a new enemy to Soroli Crisis every now and again. They're changing the difficulty, which I don't think anyone really had a problem with, and then they're just not really adding anything new. So they're trying to micro-optimize all these old events, but I think people would rather see new events, even with the same rewards, but just new events. which are still relatively easy to complete, rather than just trying to make the old events less or more annoying, really. I mean, adding this whole entire scaling mode, in my opinion, makes the event more annoying. I think the reason they did it, there are less people playing on all the difficulties, so it can be difficult to get every single lobby filled. But that being said, I think maybe it's time to scrap Sir Oli Crisis. Just an idea that could definitely work in adding a whole new game mode. Maybe something similar to an expedition, where you have to, over the course of maybe even 2 weeks, a long event I don't think would be too crazy, explore this background map. There might be something about it, there may be some resources hidden, who knows what it will be, but something cool and interesting to just spice up this event calendar would definitely make it a lot more interesting. There is no doubt in my mind. The next thing, there is also a possibility to add real PvE events instead of just barbarian patrols and then just spawning in the thief. I don't know why the thief keeps making a reappearance in events, the Champions of Olympia thief. He's just randomly in events every now and again. And I mean, once again, that is not too fun. So changing up barbarians, especially in the home kingdom, to do something unique for some events could be pretty cool. I've suggested something like the Call of Dragons bosses, where you basically get to fight this mega barbarian with your alliance. And even if you make it difficult or you put scaling mode on something like that, it could be very cool, but it would be even cooler if it's in Home Kingdom. Doing it in some separate map like you do with Sir Oli Crisis, not as fun. Doing it in Home Kingdom, though, can definitely be more unique, and I think it can definitely be much more fun. And now, the final issue, I think, with Rise of Kingdoms, and this isn't one that affects a lot of people, it really only is reason a lot of people quit the game. It's really the fact that there are a lot of really dead and small kingdoms. I think that's just a really good way to put it. I'm just going to put in a random kingdom number right now, 2456. I'm going to take a guess here that this kingdom is probably one alliance under 7 billion power, something really small. They could be within the 5 billions for all I know. This is a completely random kingdom, and there's a good chance that it's going to be relatively dead. I mean, 5 billion power, 82 members, not going to be rude to anyone that's in that kingdom if they're even watching the video, which I doubt. It's a pretty dead kingdom, and I think Rise of Kingdoms has a lot of these very dead kingdoms, quite simply put. And you know what that really causes? Dead kingdoms are boring, people end up quitting the game. It's just as simple as that. So these dead kingdoms can certainly lead to a lot of people not being as interested in the game. Now, that is a different issue to solve in and of itself. I have no idea how you would deal with very small and dead kingdoms, because most people are not going to be happy with just being shoved out of their kingdom into a random one. Because, well, if you just take a bunch of these smaller alliances, for example, these shutdown kingdoms where they don't want anyone to migrate in, and you kick them into another kingdom, they're probably not going to be the happiest. So I'm not sure exactly how you would properly leave these kingdoms into a new kingdom, or how you would get these players into the game, or actually push them to fight and playing KVKs instead of just making massive KVKs. That is definitely a pretty big issue. So I think these dead kingdoms really just encourage people to not care about the game, and it doesn't really make Rise of Kingdoms where it should be. Rise of Kingdoms is a game that it needs active playing, and people who just are in these smaller kingdoms, especially ones with shutdown migration, who just don't want to even have a part of anything besides occasionally playing a KVK and then just winning Mightiest Governors between the top players, definitely can lead to a lot of dead and boring kingdoms. So I think the majority of kingdoms in Rise of Kingdoms nowadays, they're pretty dead, and I'm not sure how that could be fixed. Even if you fix all those other issues, the issues I mentioned today will only stop players from leaving the game, but they're not going to help revive all these smaller kingdoms. Even this kingdom, 6 billion power, it's relatively small. It doesn't even have a full alliance. I mean, that definitely does say a lot. And the second you look at a kingdom that says migration closed, you can pretty much guarantee that it is going to be a dead kingdom. So a lot of kingdoms, in my opinion, are in this situation where they're extremely small, they're relatively dead, and they're just not at a position. I mean, this kingdom, the alliance that's holding the temple has 1 billion power. So I don't even know what to say about that. It's a very dead kingdom if that's the case. So you can just see in Rise of Kingdoms, a lot of these kingdoms are very, very dead. So that is definitely something that should be noted. That is a ridiculously dead kingdom with only 1 billion power. And that is definitely something you should notice. There are a lot of dying kingdoms, a lot of small kingdoms who have nothing or just don't want anything to do with fighting in KVKs. And a lot of them are selling kingdoms. I've seen that happen before. A lot of them are just trying to win Mightiest Governors and stack up accounts, and then they just ditch the kingdoms. Stuff like that can definitely lead to a lot of kingdoms just dying off, and then that's it. Once those kingdoms are dead, I've never seen a dead kingdom really revive itself, it's dead, it's gone. People just don't want to migrate there, and that definitely can create a lot of issues with keeping an active player base and making some of those KVKs interesting. Because you saw those KVKs which already have a lot of kingdoms in them. I mean, there's a lot of kingdoms in this KVK, and I think these would be mostly C seeds. So there's some massive KVKs in terms of kingdom numbers, and you might not get that many active players in those KVKs. And in the home kingdom, it's just going to be completely dead, and that's when most people quit, when they're in the off season. So I think that trying to get these smaller kingdoms back on track, not sure how it would happen, but trying to do it would definitely help get the game in a better position, in my opinion. So now that we've made it to the end of today's video, I'm going to ask you guys a small favor, and that is, tell me in the comments, first of all, do you agree with what I said? And second of all, what issues do you think Rise of Kingdoms has right now? Of course, I'm just one player in a sea of many players, and I am very interested to see what you guys think the issues are. I will also be writing up all the things I said today to send to Lilith, plus the comments down below. So if there are any issues I see and I'm like, yeah, that's a really, really good idea, even if it's just the most liked comment, I'll be happy to write that into a feedback form, and I'm going to send it off into the feedback section that I have access to. So if you want to get any feedback through to Lilith, put it down in the comments down below. It's going to be the best time. I'm going to make a very comprehensive feedback thing as big as I can get. So put it in the comments. I very much appreciate your comments. It'll help me get a bigger understanding of the game, because once again, I'm one player. There are millions of people who play this game. So I'm interested to see your feedback. Now I just want to say I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.